Good morning. Today we are going to talk about MS-25, Managing Change in Organizations. In that we are going to talk about understanding change. In your earlier course in MS-10, you would have learnt about organizational development and change, and how essential for an organization to grow further, that is development, and how an organization can have development by using diagnosis, getting the feedback from the people who are working in the organization, use certain interventions to find out and to get the feedback, analyze that, and then you try to bring the change in the organization. Whenever you want to bring a change for any purpose, either in your personal life or in your organizational life where you are working, you try to resist the change because the status quo is not maintained. You fear that there will be difficulties in some form or the other, and that will create trouble to you when you are working in an organization. But change is inevitable, whether it is in your work life or whether it is in your personal life, because change is always progressive and it is inevitable. So to cope with the change, a person has to learn how to deal with it. So it is essential for anybody to understand what is change and how to cope with that change, and what are the reasons for change to occur. So today we will talk about change and try to understand what exactly the change is and how to deal with it. What exactly is change? Change is making things different. You are not going to follow the same thing over and over. So you want to make things differently. You want to make things look different. Why? The reason is to cope with certain changes which are taking place because of certain external forces in the environment which are affecting you. As such, you have to deal with change. When you deal with change, you make things look different. So change means making, one of the meanings of change is to make things different. Change also means dissatisfaction with the old and belief in the new. That is, you are not satisfied with the conditions which are prevailing. As such, you want to create certain changes in the work so that you derive satisfaction. So you are not satisfied and you have a belief that it has to be changed. So as such, because of dissatisfaction with the present environment, you want to change. Change also underlines a qualitatively different ways of perceiving, thinking and behaving to improve over the past and the present. So you need a qualitative change, not a quantitative change, but a qualitative change in terms of perception, the way you perceive things. In terms of your thinking, thinking also has to change when you have to deal with it. And also it affects the behavior so that it improves your performance. So the change is from past and the present to certain other aspect. Change is always continuous. So change should be seen as a continuous. Over a period of time, you have to know that you have to go for a change, and which might be intrinsic to an organization or an extrinsic and discontinuous also. So change is always continuous. You are going to discontinue certain aspects which are affecting your organization, which are not good for your organization. As such, you want the change to occur for your organization. So these changes have to occur, and it occurs continuously. So change is always continuous. Change also can be patterned and it can also be predictable. Over a period of time, you know the technology has become obsolete. So you have to adapt new technology in order to cope with the environmental changes, or to develop a product, or to bring certain changes so that you can achieve the deadlines prescribed to you. So change can be patterned and predictable, but change can also be complex and unpredictable. Sometimes, for example, in today's environment, you have seen in today's business environment, the collapse in US which has happened because of certain financial resources, it affected, and which was unpredictable. People never thought that US financial resources are not predictable. So that has affected. So change is complex and unpredictable also. So you should know how to deal with unpredictable changes. The rate of change is so fast that our ability to comprehend and cope with it is limited. So as the rate changes is faster, then you should have also the ability to understand and cope with it. So in order to understand change, you should know that change is continuous, and change can be patterned, it can be complex, it can be simple, it can be predictable, it can be unpredictable. Sometimes the rate of change is so fast that you have to cope with it. You should have that ability to comprehend the change and deal with it. Change is dual or bipolar. In one side you have continuity to deal with the change. If you don't change, it leads to what? It leads to stagnation, it leads to frustration, it leads to boredom among individuals. And change without continuity leads to ambiguity, conflict, degenerative pathology in individuals and organizations. So continuity, you are continuing with the obsolete technology in your organization without coping with the change. What does it lead to? It leads to certain stagnation, it leads to frustration, it leads to monotony, it leads to boredom among individuals, and change without continuity leads to ambiguity, conflict, and degeneration takes place among individuals as well as among organizations. So one has to cope with the change and do whatever is possible to deal with that change, to avoid the stagnation, to avoid frustration, to avoid monotony or boredom among individuals, and also the ambiguity, conflict in the organization. According to Reg Revans, learning is greater than change, which means you are ahead in the game. That is, you are learning faster than things change. That is an ideal environment in an organization if you are able to learn faster certain things and you are predicting those things are going to occur. For example, you have seen Dr. Abdul Kalam, the President of India, former President of India, who has written a book on Vision 2020. He knows what is going to occur in terms of technology, and he predicted that India will reach that stage. So the learning is faster. When the learning is faster, you are able to cope with the changes which are going to take place in future. So learning is greater than change. So when learning is greater than change, you are ahead in the game. That is, you are learning faster than the changes which are going to take place. If the change is greater than learning, then it leads to disaster, because things are changing so fast that you are not able to learn and cope with it. So you are behind the race. So it is essential for any organization to learn. That is the reason we have learning organizations. What are learning organizations? It means the organizations are thinking ahead to cope with the changes which are going to occur. Like TQM, Total Quality Management. For example, ISO 9000 series. all these aspects, you know that these are the qualitative changes which are required for your products made by your organization. So you go ahead with those products mentioning these are very useful products and the quality is useful till you reach that century. So if you are able to cope with the changes, if you are able to learn before the changes occur, that will be a good reasonable and the organization will be able to deal with change, and it will develop itself for the further growth and also for the environment. So learning has to be faster than the change which takes place in the environment. What exactly happens? How a change occurs? You are working in an organization, and also you have your own personal experiences. So your work experiences and your personal experiences reflect on your experiences. So you are working in an organization, but you have your own work experiences, your own personal experiences along with personal and work life together, that will reflect the experience you have. So based on the experience which you have in terms of your work, in terms of your life, you are drawing out certain principles and concepts to cope with the change. When you learn these aspects, these principles, these concepts, you are testing out these principles in new situations. By testing out principles in new situations, you are coming out with certain innovations, certain creativity for your organization, and this is how the whole circle moves. You have work experience, you have life experience which reflect on your experience, and then with that reflection you draw out principles and concepts and you test these principles and concepts in new situation. This is how the whole learning process takes place. Business changes takes place because of the changes which takes place in the external environment. What are the changes in external environment? It could be due to certain market changes, certain technological changes, certain organizational changes which takes place in the environment. So let us know. So because of certain market changes, there is a change in your products, in your services. So the market changes are one of the reasons for a change to occur in an organization. So what are the market changes? For example, customer wants certain new goods or new services. So you try to evolve whatever products are essential for the customers, whatever are the needs of the customers. You try to evolve those goods or services. And then also, because of certain tough competition which is existing in the market, you want to cope with that kind of competition, tough competition. As such, you are changing your goods or changing your services. Sometimes because of certain favorable or unfavorable government decisions, the change takes place in the market. The price mechanisms, raw material shortage, all these causes specific changes in organizations. So market changes are one of the components for changes to occur in an organization. So you have seen it could be governmental decisions, it could be because of certain price mechanisms which are taking place because of certain shortage in terms of your resources in the market. The changes are occurring in an organization. Changes occur in an organization also because of certain technological change, technology. So introduction of a new technology in order to re-establish price advantage, quality preeminence, or diversification into new products. So when technology changes, you have to introduce that new technology into your organization because it is essential to cope with the changes which are taking place in the environment. That will lead to price advantage, that will lead to deal with the competition, that will also lead to the quality, better quality by introduction of new technology. And also diversification takes place in terms of new products. So we have seen, based on the market, based on the technology, the changes takes place in organizations. The responses to the market and technology changes require new styles of organization, new skills, upgradation from the old ones. The number of operating sites may be reduced. So what happens when the changes occurs because of certain market forces, certain technological forces? When the introduction of new technology takes place in the organization, naturally new styles emerge to manage the organization. New skills, you have to upgrade your skills to cope with that. The number of operating sites also should be reduced. With the environmental changes, with the market changes, what is happening? More and more mergers and acquisitions are taking place. Small company is taken over by a larger company, so that the small company is able to cope with the environmental changes which are taking place. So the mergers and acquisitions with such ownership changes will lead to certain organizations. So because of certain market forces, because of certain new technology, the styles of management changes, upgradation of the skills takes place, and certain amount of downsizing takes place. The operating sites are reduced because there is no need for diversification. So many sites, there is no need for that. So you try to do that by in terms of technology. When the new technology takes place, you try to reduce it. And then when mergers and acquisitions takes place, with such ownership changes, the changes also follows in an organization. The organizational life cycle concept simply applies the same idea of a life of a business. First, what happens whenever an organization is established? Pioneering takes place. What is pioneering? You all sit together, you make your vision and vision for the organization, and then you try to reach those vision and mission. So there is a lot of cohesiveness among the people from different departments, and then you try to reach the goals of the organization. So whenever we say they are the pioneers for this organization, because that means they are the persons who started this organization and with certain goals, and which has become over a period of time diversified. So pioneers, in the first cycle of an organization, pioneering period takes place, where people come together as a team and work for the organization. Over a period of time, what happens? Initial period of time, you don't have any systematization in your organization. You have to reach the goal, you will follow whatever procedure has to be followed. There is no need for any kind of established procedure. So you try to follow whatever is possible, come together and achieve that particular goal. But over a period of time, the organization streamlines all these aspects. Because over a period of time, your goals are changed, your ways of working are changed, diversification of goals takes place, many people are recruited, and then you try to systemize all these processes. So what happens once you systemize all these processes? Over a period of time, the monotony sets in. When the monotony starts setting in, you go for certain innovations and certain creativities. That's how the integration takes place. This is the life cycle of any organization. There is a pioneering period, then you systemize, and then you go for integration. So for any organization, the change takes place from pioneering period to a systematization period, from systematization period to an integration. you consolidate and you try to follow up what is good for that particular organization. That's how you integrate in totality and try to know what exactly an organization has to do at that period to cope with the changes which are occurring. So you go for certain changes, innovations, based on the market changes, based on the technological changes, based on the customer needs. You try to integrate all these aspects and cope with the change. Larry Greener has a similar picture of 5 phases and 5 crises which induce change. He says the change occurs because of certain 5 aspects, 5 phases. He called them phases. Creativity occurs because there is a crisis in leadership in an organization. So you have to grow through creativity. Growth happens only because of creativity. When there is crisis at leadership level, then creativity takes place. When the second phase is when there is always direction, that you have to do this, there is a procedure to achieve that particular goal, and sense of direction is always prevailing in any aspect, that will obstruct your autonomy. When the direction is there always, there won't be any creativity. There won't be any innovation. There won't be any change. So that will, frustrate or camouflage your innovation, your creativity abilities. There is no sense of autonomy. When there is a need for autonomy and you are so frustrated with this kind of direction which is prevailing in the organization, the changes takes place. Then there is also a phase in an organization, delegation part. When you start delegating things, like we were talking about earlier 3 phases, pioneering phase, systematization. In systematization phase, we said that all the procedures are established. Similarly, here what happens over a period of time, when the organization grows, when the diversification takes place in an organization, the delegation process takes place. Because everything can't be centralized, it will be very difficult to work if the more centralization process is there. So you try to decentralize, you try to delegate the things and get things done. Then what happens when you delegate and decentralize, when there is no control over this, then crisis takes place. So when the crisis takes place, in terms of control, the change occurs in the organization. The other phase is growth through coordination. Coordination is there when there is decentralization, delegation, when you establish certain coordinators to get hold of those things or to look towards those things, start monitoring and get things done. So when these things happen, when delegation, decentralization, coordination starts taking place in an organizational situation, red tape takes place. People feel that they are very powerful. Without them, the organization cannot function, and everybody has to come to them for any work to be done for that particular organization. When this kind of coordination takes place, the change is inevitable. People get fed up with that kind of control mechanisms, that kind of red tapeism which is prevailing in an organization. So they want to come out of it. So the change takes place in that particular organization. This can happen in any organization. It starts off with certain creativity. When creativity gets some kind of stagnation, takes place in terms of creativity, then there is crisis in the leadership and change is inevitable there. So over a period of time, the organization has sense of direction, how to do things. The autonomy is limited. Then the change takes place. Because of certain delegation processes, decentralization processes, coordination processes which takes place in the organization over a period of time, when it grows further, certain control mechanisms and certain red tapeism takes place. As such, change occurs in the organization. When all these periods are covered, then you try to collaborate with the different organizations to cope with certain changes, so that there is no repeatism of what one organization is doing. There is no need. You adapt from that organization, or you outsource those processes to that particular organization, and that way you try to collaborate with other organizations to cope with those changes. So creativity, direction, delegation, coordination, collaboration, all these phases lead to change. So these are the 5 phases or 5 crises which induce change to occur in an organization. Harry Woodward and Steve Buckholz explain organization life cycle as formative, normative and integrative. We had earlier learned about 3 stages, that is pioneering, systematization, integrity. Similarly, we learned about 5 phases which are inducing change in an organization. Now let us learn, according to Harry Woodward, he explained organization life cycle having 3 stages. Formative stage, which we can compare to the pioneering stage, normative stage, which we can compare to systematization, and then finally integrative stage. What happens in a formative stage? Formative stage is leader-manager. A leader leads the persons. He is a leader-manager. That is, he leads the employees towards that particular goal, and he manages also similarly. Inventing, learning, risk-taking, all these processes takes place in formative stage for any organization. So when you finish with the formative stage, the change occurs, then you go to the next stage, which is we call it normative stage. What happens in the normative stage? The systems, procedures, measures, guidelines, formality, all these processes take place in normative stage for any organization. It is not possible for any organization to remain at formative stage itself. It is not at all possible, because once you try to invent things, you learn the processes, you know how to risk-take and achieve that particular goal, you go to the next stage. So the change is inevitable. So you move to the next stage, which he called it as normative stage. Normative stage is systems, procedures, measures, guidelines and formality are established. Then you move towards the next stage, which is integrative stage. What happens in an integrative stage? Innovation takes place, collaboration takes place, new growth, you move towards new growth, freedom on the job, creativity. So in an organization life cycle, it moves from formative stage to normative stage, from normative stage to integrative stage, which are inevitable. These changes are inevitable. In order to cope with these changes from formative to normative, organization has to learn how to cope with that stage. Similarly, when you move towards the integrative stage, how to cope and deal with those changes, one has to learn, because these stages of change are inevitable for any organization. What are the triggers for change? The triggers for change are the market conditions which are prevailing, the technology which to meet market demand competitively, the organization of your resources. So the changes occur because of certain market forces, because of certain technological forces, and also because of the resources which are limited or which are more or which are less. Based on the resources also, the changes takes place. So these are the 3 forces which lead an organization to change. When you're saying market forces, technological forces, certain resources, what happens? The triggers for change are because of certain financial losses for an organization, when there are financial losses in an organization, what happens? To cope with those losses, they go for certain aspects like downsizing, curbing their products, maybe limited products only they will go for. So these kind of changes takes place for that organization because of certain financial losses, because of certain drop in their profits. Sometimes the organization goes for change because of certain increased competition, loss of market share, industry recession. Because of these aspects, changes takes place. Change also takes place when there is a change in your head of the organization. When a new chief executive officer emerges or who enters the organization, he brings with him his new ideas, innovations, creativity. They want the changes to occur. So when there is a new change in your leader, the changes takes place in the organization. Sometimes the organization is so proactive, it looks for the opportunities and the threats are foreseen. As such, the changes takes place. Similarly, as we had learnt earlier, due to certain technological changes, technological development, change takes place. Sometimes staff utilization is also necessary to cope with the change. So the triggers for change are losses, financial losses or less profits because of certain competitions which are emerging in the market, because of certain leadership changes, being proactive, you foresee things, and so because of certain technological development, you try to change. The organization changes. These are the reasons for an organization to change. So we had learned about triggers to change. We said certain market forces, certain technological forces, certain leadership changes. These are the reasons for an organization to go for a change. But sometimes organizations changes because of certain crisis which emerges. Change was often triggered by the need to meet danger or to avoid impending disaster. In order to avoid disaster, in order to avoid dangers, you try to cope with the changes which are taking place, which are essential for an organization. If the changes stem from a threat to financial results, it is crisis change. So you call it crisis when there are financial losses for that particular organization. When there are financial losses, you go for a change in that particular organization, which can be called as a crisis change. Then, as we had learnt earlier also, because of certain changes in chief executive, new leader comes into the organization who touches the hearts and minds of everybody working in an organization. And the person is able to project a vision, a sense of direction, and an energy to get a result. In this way, they introduce and manage change. So when a new chief executive officer or when a new person comes, when a new CMD comes to the organization with certain innovations, he wants to bring certain changes in that organization which is going on doing the same things. So he tries to bring certain changes, he projects certain changes in the vision of that particular organization. A sense of direction, he brings with him a sense of direction, and also an energy to get, he also brings with certain processes which can take place in that organization. So in order to get the result. In this way, the new person who joins, the new leader who joins in an organization, when he comes with these aspects, he tries to manage and introduce change. Then what happens when the leader comes with certain innovative ideas? Then your vision statements, mission statements, there is a change in these statements so that they contribute to the promotion of proactive change, often involving groups of managers and employees in the work. So the person, when he comes with such a background, then he is proactive to the changes which has to take place. So he involves certain groups of managers and employees in the work so that your mission statements could be changed for the development of the organization. For example, you can look at Zan Collison of SAS coined the mission statement daily, moment of truth, as employees at any level came face to face with customers. So every day there is a change because of the moment of truth. So you have to change your mission also according to the changes which take place in your environment. So when a CEO joins, when a new person joins the organization, when a new leader emerges, then the top people do not conform to one pattern only. So because there will be changes with different personalities. Some people are charismatic, some people are flamboyant, some provide strategic vision, some people adapt to implementation. They have to be resolute and tough. Whatever may be the personal styles, the top people manages changes successfully. Whenever a new person comes, new CEO comes, new CMT comes, the styles vary because each person is different. Some come with certain strategic vision. Some come with certain implementation. They get ideas from others who are working in the organization and they try to implement those. And some are very resolute and some are very tough. So based on these different personal styles, the top people manage change successfully. So we have learned about the market changes, the technological changes, the leadership changes which take place in the organization. As such, the changes takes place. So when we are talking about CEOs, most CEOs seek to improve results to do something about the organization structure and culture of their enterprise. So organization change will make a difference to the immediacy of reaching in terms of decision making, information sharing, communications and policy implementation. We stop here. We'll continue after 15 minutes. Thank you.